Hey.
My name is Richard Rives. I'm president of Wyatt Archaeological Research. I worked with Ron during the last 10 years of his life. And basically we're here in the room where we share the information about the Noah's Ark site over in eastern Turkey. What Ron found is a boat-shaped object, the exact dimensions as specified in the Bible for Noah's Ark. At one point, the Turkish government declared it a national treasure and a national park and built a visitor center at the site. In 1990, Ron and I went over and cleaned one side, so you can see what appear to be rib timbers coming down. And then shortly after that, we were taken hostage and ended up climbing mountains at the end of a gun for about a month. And since then, I haven't been able to get the permits we need. We do three-dimensional subsurface radar. And I was over there a few years ago. We thought we had the permits, and then 2 weeks later, the whole government changed. And so there's still work that we need to do on the site, but we just hadn't been able to get the permits. These pieces are fossilized. They're petrified, so they're like a rock, but they have organic carbon in them. So we know they used to be once living. We believe that these could be horizontal deck supports that run across and connect with rib timbers on the outside. Once again, in 1990, Ron and I went over to clean one side, so you can see what appears to be rib timbers coming down there. And we believe those horizontal deck supports could connect with that. It appears to have been put together with metal fittings. This piece has what we would call modern day alloys in magnesium, titanium, aluminum, and other metals. But if you go back to Genesis chapter 4, it talks about a man named Tubal-Cain. It says he was an instructor of every artificer of brass and iron. So they were making alloys several generations before the time of Noah. We really shouldn't be surprised that they knew all about metals. The unit of measure that Moses would have used to describe Noah's Ark would be the Royal Egyptian cubit. He grew up in Egypt, so that's what he was familiar with. The Royal Egyptian cubit is the cubit and a handbreadth that Ezekiel talks about. It's a handbreadth longer than the Hebrew cubit. And using laser measurement on the site, it works out exactly 300 of those Royal Egyptian cubits. I've measured the big pyramid over in Egypt. It measures out in Royal Egyptian cubits. And I've measured King Solomon's gates at 3 different locations in Israel, at Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. They all measure out exactly in Royal Egyptian cubits. And then I've also measured some 6th and 7th century BC tombs up above Damascus Gate in Jerusalem, which would be from Solomon's time, and they measure out in Royal Egyptian cubits. So when you read things in the Old Testament, it's a little bigger than people have thought. It's based on the 20.6-inch Royal Egyptian cubit.
Okay.
This is information on the cities of the plains, Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim. The Bible says that God rained fire and brimstone on those cities and burned them up. It says that they were to be an ensample or a visual example for people that would choose to live ungodly lives. And the remains of those cities are still right out there along the western shores of the Dead Sea. When you burn calcium carbonate or limestone, which is what those old Canaanite cities were made out of, in the presence of brimstone or sulfur, produces calcium sulfate ash. And everything you see out there is 100% calcium sulfate with brimstone all in the layers of ash. And these are pieces of brimstone down here, and you can see some of them still stuck in chunks of ash down below. Genesis 10:19 tells you where to look for those cities. It says they were the borders of the Canaanites. And so they're scattered out along the western shores of the Dead Sea. Zeboim's actually north of Jericho. In 1 Samuel, we read about a Philistine army traveling in 3 different directions from Michmash, which was about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. And one part of the army went east toward the valley of Zeboim, and there's still ash and remains in that area. So everything you see there is just crumbly powder ashes with brimstone all in the layers of ash.
Any comment on the ziggurat?
No, I don't want to.
Okay.
Okay.
Over here we have some other displays.
Okay. This is information on the Red Sea crossing. If you remember, when Moses killed an Egyptian, he fled to Midian, married Jethro's daughter, and became a Midianite shepherd. So he was in present-day Saudi Arabia when he came on the burning bush at Mount Sinai. At the time of the Exodus, he was supposed to bring the people back to that mountain, but they were told to turn back and encamp by the sea. And when they did, they got in this canyon, Wadi Wach here, that leads out onto a big beach here at Nueva. When you get in that canyon, you're stuck there for about 20 miles, and the Bible says that Pharaoh thought the wilderness had shut them in. And that's exactly what happens when you get in there. We believe this is where they came out and that this is where they crossed. Right up here and right down here is 6,000 feet deep, so it'd be like going in and out of the Grand Canyon. But right across there, because of the sand washing out of those canyons during the flash floods, it's filled in the Red Sea right there and made a gradual slope all the way across. And the Bible says that God prepared a way in the deep, and that's exactly what we find there. Ron went diving in the Red Sea and found artifacts, and so when he knew where they crossed, he knew that Mount Sinai had to be in Saudi Arabia. And Galatians chapter 4 talks about Mount Sinai in Arabia. The traditional site is here in the peninsula, now known as the Sinai Peninsula. The way this became known as Mount Sinai, Helena, Constantine's mother, went around picking out holy places, and she said that was Mount Sinai. You just didn't argue with Constantine's mama. That wasn't a good idea. And so, because Ron found the crossing right here, he knew that, just like Galatians chapter 4 says, that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. So he went on over into Saudi Arabia and found the real Mount Sinai. The Bedouins know it as Jebel Musa, the mountain of Moses. They were told to build the altars of unhewn stones or just pile up rocks, and the altars are still right there. This one has Egyptian petroglyphs of Hathor and Apis, the cow and bull gods of Egypt. This is where they worship the golden calf. We read about the rock at Horeb, where Moses was supposed to smite the rock and bring water out. And there's a 60-foot tall boulder split right down through the middle, and you can see where water just poured all out of there. And so everything described in the Bible is still right there. When Ron showed it to the Saudis, they built a 12-foot tall chain link fence all the way around it and declared it to be a secure area, put security agents out there. And it's on their map today as Jebel Musa, the mountain of Moses, or Mount Sinai. And then over here is the information on our work in Jerusalem. Ron dug in a cave system north of Damascus Gate for 3.5 years and claims to have located the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Bible says that only in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses is every word established. And Ron was not able to prove that he found the Ark of the Covenant before he passed away in 1999. So in an effort to provide some confirmation for that, we completely re-excavated that area from 2003 through 2007, and we're still working over there. In 2003, we were in King Solomon's Quarries, or Zedekiah's Cave, under the old city. And then in 2003, we were right down there where you see, in 2005, we were right down there where you see Ron. That's about 30 feet underground. And we worked with Israel Antiquities Authority, and because it was so dangerous down there, the safety engineers that we worked with insisted that we excavate from the surface. So in 2006, we excavated all the way down from the surface, and we found first century ruins down there. We found a cistern that would hold 12,000 gallons of water, and artifacts dating all the way back to the time of King Solomon. We found what Ron described as a crucifixion site, but we could not find a crack that led on down or a chamber under that. And so once we got down there, we drilled 2.5-inch boreholes in every direction and ran borehole radar in those holes, and we could not find a chamber down there that would contain the Ark of the Covenant. What Ron said made perfect sense to me, and still does, but at this time we can't confirm it. We couldn't find the facts and the data to support a chamber under that area. So we're still working. Right now we're about 75 feet underground, once again back in Zedekiah's Cave, or King Solomon's Quarries, and we're heading north, and we're making a lot of progress. We had about 60 people working there this year.
Some sulfur, balls of sulfur, brimstone, replica,
You seem a little bit hostile to Ron's work.
Yes, I like to see the proof. That's what a lot of them, he's made a lot of extraordinary claims, and with extraordinary claims, you need extraordinary evidence.
I agree.
And I haven't seen the evidence.
So what do you need to see? Do you think it's Mount Sinai right here?
Well, I think there's a black part, but the black part is basalt. And any geologist can tell you that. It's not because fire came down from heaven and burnt it. It's a regular basalt rock.
Do you believe that fire came down from heaven and melted the top of Mount Sinai?
God could do it, but looking at that mountain, it doesn't look like that happened.
But you believe that His presence came down on top of the mountain?
He can do that. God can do anything.
But do you believe He did it?
But there would be evidence of that happening, and when you look at it, it's just regular basalt, not fire from heaven. And did he say he translated this column here? Or is that like translation available on that pillar?
Through the interview.
Okay.